Hi, welcome back to Christine's Home Affairs. Yesterday's video I showed you how to draft a pattern for this skirt. Today I'm going to show you how to go about putting it together. Stick around and we'll quickly assemble this skirt. Okay, we've got our two pattern pieces. We've got the skirt pattern here, of which we need 6 pieces. And we have our waistband pattern, which we need to cut on the fold. So the fabric that I'm using here today is actually a furnishing fabric, but it's like a drape or a curtain material. It's got a nice weight to it. It'll have really good structure to the skirt. This is the wrong side. Normally I would put right sides together. Today I'm just going to have the right side facing up and we can start laying our pattern pieces out. With my waist fabric, I've got the folded edge here and the folded edge of my fabric as well. And you want to make sure that the grain line is nice and even as well. You can start by pinning your pattern to the fabric, or if you've got some weights, you can just pop those down. Because I've got a very straight edge here, I'm going to use the edge of my ruler just to hold the pattern down and trace out my pattern. So you should be able to see a blue outline of my pattern along here, and we can go and cut this out when we're ready. Take your skirt pattern and line that up on the very edge of the fold of your fabric here. So we've got our folded edge here, that will line up just on the edge, and you can pin that in place. We're going to trace out the outline of the pattern here. Once we've done that, remove the pattern piece, because remember we're using the same piece for all pieces of our skirt. And this is a non-directional fabric, so I can flip my paper upside down. Now we've got the folded edge here and the side of the fabric here. We've got the center fold. If you line up the diagonal with the diagonal edge of the fabric that we've just traced out and line that up along that straight edge there, we're going to have the same grain line happening here because this is the center fold. This will be flipped over. We'll have the same grain line going across as we have here. Trace that out. We don't want to trace this whole line out, but we want to mark the center position here and down here. Now carefully, we're going to flip this over. And you can see I've marked a line just here, which is the center, and along here as well. So that's the center fold. Flip the fabric over, place your weights back down, and continue to trace this pattern out here. So what I've done here is traced out this half and this half of the pattern, and then we've got that piece as well. Now that will do half the skirt. I'm going to cut this section out before I cut the other half of the skirt. So far I have one section of the skirt done on the fold, and then I have another 2 pieces opened out. So that gives us 3 pieces in all, and I'll go and cut the other 3 pieces out of the rest of the fabric. All right, all 6 pieces of our skirt fabric have been cut out. We have our waistband fabric just here. We can set our skirt pieces aside for the time being. I have my waistband here. This is the wrong side facing up, the right side is facing down. And I have a product called Fuse and Fold. This is it's a waistband interfacing. So it's an iron-on slotted waistband interfacing. So we're going to fuse this onto the wrong side of our skirt band. You can just use regular interfacing if you don't have access to this. Just place that over the top of your fabric centre it evenly there, and then press it onto your fabric. Okay, that will provide a really nice stabiliser for our waistband. The next thing we want to do is take our skirt panel pieces, and we're going to place them right side together. So grab 2 pieces and we'll put right sides together, and then we're going to pin them to stitch all the panels together. I find putting my pins in this way, which is perpendicular to the fabric, is much better to use, as when you put the pins in this way, you're not distorting the fabric as much as you do when you put them in this way. So it just keeps everything nice and straight. We're going to stitch a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam all the way down that side. Now we're going to put each of 2 panels together. So I'll get all of these pinned up and ready to go. Okay, I've got 3 pairs of panels to be stitched together. I'll go and take that to the machine now, and we'll do that. Once we've done that, we'll attach these 3 pieces together as well. So you'll go and stitch all of these side seams together, and after all of that we will leave one section open. Okay, we will start off with a back stitch. We're going to start at the top section of the skirt, stitch a 1 centimetre seam allowance all the way down, and we'll back stitch at the beginning and the end. And just allow the fabric to feed through by itself. You don't want to push the fabric through. Once you've done that, you'll repeat the same process for the other 2 sets. So just take each panel section, and this is the side that we've stitched so far, and open it out, and this seam will want to go in that one direction. So if we just open that out exactly like that, and we will press our skirt so that the seam goes just off to that direction there. It really doesn't matter whether it goes this way or that way, it's just whichever way you've folded the fabric. Grab the next one and we'll do the same thing. Flip your fabric over, give it a good press, and that seam will sit nice and flat. It's much easier to do this now than it is when we finish the skirt. Of course, you want to give the whole thing a good press anyway. And the final piece before we put those 3 panels together. Now take your double panel and grab the next one, place it right side together. Once you've pinned these 4 sections together, open it out again and grab the final piece and place it right side together, and we can pin that together as well. Take all of that back to the machine and we'll sew all of these 6 panels together, and we won't close this one just yet. And starting at the top again, I've got all of the pieces pinned together. Same process as before, back stitch at the beginning and the end. Find the other one and we can stitch that closed as well. It's such a quick skirt to make. Just make sure all the layers are out of the way as well so you don't accidentally stitch them. And now we'll take that back to the iron and give it another good press to the seams that we've just stitched. We're going to press the rest of the seams in exactly the same direction as we had done with the original ones. So the first ones we had pressed the seams away from us, and we'll do exactly the same with the ones that we've just stitched together. Once you've done that, take the 2 final seams and we'll bring those together. The last 2 sides that haven't been stitched together, we're going to place them together, and we're going to be putting a zip in the back here. So you don't want to stitch all the way down. And the other thing too, we've done a 1 centimetre seam allowance on all of the other seams, but wherever you put a zip, you want to have a 2 centimetre seam allowance. Okay, we need to make an allowance for our zipper, but we're going to mark an area at 7 inches or 18 centimetres. So I'll mark that just there. I'll pop a pin in there, And this is where I'm going to start sewing. So we'll leave this area open and we'll start here, we'll do a back stitch, and then we'll do a 2 centimetre seam allowance all the way down. 2 centimetres is 3/4 of an inch. So we'll do a 2 centimetre seam allowance or 3/4 inch seam allowance from here all the way down to the bottom, and we'll back stitch when we get to the end. And when we've done that, rather than pressing the seam in one direction, we're going to press this final seam with the seams open. Before you start, just measure that you've got a 2 centimetre seam allowance on the side of your skirt, and I've got my pin here where I'm starting to sew about 7.5 inches or 18 centimetres from the top edge. Remove the pin, we'll do a back stitch at the beginning, and then just do your 2 centimetre seam allowance all the way to the end. When you get to the end, you can back stitch, and there is our 2 centimetre seam allowance. We'll take this back to the iron and we're going to press this open. Then we're going to go to our overlocker or serger and we'll start overlocking all of the edges. Okay, this is the last seam that we need to press. I've got the rest of the skirt out of the way and I've just got the fabric nice and flat, and I'll open the seam out here and just give that a good press. And just at the top edge here, measure that 2 centimetres as well so that you've got it nice and straight. And I'll just turn that the right way around, make sure that sits nice and flat. Okay, now that we've done the pressing, we're going to go to the overlocker or serger, and these 2 seams here, we're going to overlock the raw edges on each side. Now if you don't have an overlocker, then you can just do a zigzag on each side. These ones here are the only ones that need to be overlocked individually, and then all of the other seams that we've got here, we just need to go and serge or overlock the edges on all of those. Once we've done that, then we'll go to the bottom edge of the skirt and we're going to do the same thing all along the bottom edge, and because the seams are all going in the one direction, they'll want to stay in that direction. Make sure you do that when you're overlocking. And whilst we're there, we will also overlock just one long edge of our waistband. Now it doesn't matter which one we start with. I'm going to start off with a 2 centimetre seam on the centre back. Make sure when you're overlocking, because we've got a cutting blade on here, that you don't have any of your fabric from the skirt sitting on the wrong side, otherwise you'll end up cutting it. Repeat for the other one. And then we can go and overlock the edges on all of the other skirt panels. And with the skirt panels done, we are going to just quickly go and serge one long edge of the waistband. Then we'll also do the bottom hem of the skirt. I'm going to start at the centre back. It really doesn't matter where you start, but where the 2 seams are here, I'm going to leave that open, overlock all the way along the bottom edge there. When I come to these seams here that have already been done, they've all been pressed to one direction. I'm going to make sure when I overlock those that they're going in the same direction. So I like to start with the right side of my skirt facing up, and I've got my centre seam open, and then the other seams have all been pressed in the one direction, which is heading toward me or away from the overlocker. So I'm coming up to a seam here. I've got the seam underneath pointing in my direction, and we'll repeat that for the entire skirt. And that's all we need the overlocker for. Now we're going to do some gathering at the top waist section of the skirt. So this is the waist here. We need to run a couple of rows of really long stitching along the top edge of the entire waist so that we can gather our fabric. I've popped a nice bright yellow thread on just so that you can see the stitching when I've done that. And we don't want to do a back stitch at the beginning or the end because we want to be able to pull our stitches. So I'm just going to use a scrap piece of fabric to run off first because my machine does an automatic back stitch at the beginning and the end. Normally I would do a stitch length of 2.5, but I'm going to change the stitch length on my machine to the maximum stitch length that it will do. I've just increased it to 6, so that's the maximum that it will do. It will allow me to easily gather the fabric. Now there are a few different techniques for gathering fabric. If you'd like me to do a video on just gathering, let me know and I'll do that separately. But for today we're going to do 2 rows of straight stitching with a really long stitch length. So I'll run off some stitches first just to get rid of my back stitch, and then from here I'm going to stitch very close to the edge, probably about 1/4 of an inch or 5 or 6 millimeters, and I'll continue all the way to the end. And when I'm stitching here, we've got the seam that's underneath the skirt here has been overlocked in this direction now because that's the bottom of the skirt. So this seam here at the top needs to run in the same direction. So when we get to the seam at the waistband here, make sure that that is facing toward the machine rather than against the machine. And then that way you've got nicely lined up seams. And when you're sewing, you just want the fabric to run itself through the machine. You don't want to be pushing it. When you get to the other end, make sure that 2 centimeter seam allowance is open. And remember not to backstitch here. Just pull your thread out. And we have the yellow thread sitting on the top there. And then we're going to go back to the beginning and do this all over again. So we want to have 2 rows of stitching. And you might notice here that it's already started gathering, and that's because it's such a big stitch length that I've used that it's automatically started gathering the fabric itself. But because of the weight of the fabric and because we still need to pull some gathering threads, we can't just rely on 1 row of stitching. We need the 2 just in case it happens to snap. Having the 2 threads will make it easier to actually draw everything in. The next row of stitching is very, very close to the first row, so probably about 1/8 of an inch away from the first one. And when you get to the end, just pull the threads off so that you've got a fair tail hanging off at the end. With our waistband, bring the 2 short edges together and just mark a pin in the centre on the long edge that doesn't have the overlocking. So you can mark a pin in the centre there, or you can just take a notch out of the fabric, just a small one. So you can see a little notch taken out there, and we'll set that aside. And then take your skirt and find the ends of your thread. So we're going to take our top threads and gently start gathering the fabric. Now a lot of this is already gathered because the sewing machine has done the work for us. I haven't pushed it through, but because of the extra long stitch length, it's actually gathered itself. So we want to distribute the gathers evenly, and you can do that until it matches the length of your waistband. And we'll want to do this on both ends of the fabric, so we want to draw it in equally. And run these gathers along until you've got the right length. Then we want to find the centre front of our skirt. So we've got the opening here at the centre back, and we'll find the centre front panel, which is this one just here. Take your waistband, and this seam here is our centre front. Place that notch that we've got there over the centre front of your skirt and pin that in place. Find the end of your waistband and match that up with the back of your skirt. Line up that straight edge with the straight edge at the back of your skirt and pin that in place, and go to the other end as well, and we'll do the same thing. And once you've got the side edges lined up properly, then you can start easing all these gathers so that it fits into the waistband. I've done 1/2 of the skirt. Now I've just got to manipulate the other half of the skirt so that it all fits in to that panel. We need to go back to the machine and sew the waistband onto the skirt, and just make sure to change your stitch length back to whatever it is you usually use. Okay, I've changed my stitch length back to 2.5. I've got my waistband with the interfacing facing up, and I'm going to be stitching through this row of gaps in here. So you can see just along here we've got some openings or perforations. We'll be stitching right along there. We'll do a back stitch at the beginning and the end. Make sure you remove your pins as you go. And I'll just change my thread back to a nice grey rather than that bright yellow. When you get to the end, back stitch. And what I want to do here is just make sure the top edge of my fabric, or the seams of my fabric, match up in line with the zipper, so that when I put the zip in, I don't have any puckers. Open your waistband out, match up the seam that you've just done right on the edge there with the one on the other side. So you want those seams to match up, and then you also want the opening of the zipper to match up without having any. You don't want to have it looking like that with a big loop inside. You want the edge of the waistband lined up perfectly, and you want to have this opening here without any puckers as well. And if that's all good, then we can go and hem the skirt. Now, normally you would go and give this a really good press. I've got my overlocked edges at the bottom here. I'm going to be doing a very narrow hem. All I'm going to basically be doing is turning over my overlocked edge, rather than having a centimetre or 2 centimetres or having anything turned. I'm just going to have just a very small hem, because there's a fair bit of flare at the bottom, and it means that I won't have any puckers or pleats. So starting at the centre back, I'm going to turn my hem up just a fraction more than the width of my overlocked edge. I've only got about a 1 centimetre hem, or 3/8 of an inch, and I'm going to stitch on the lowest edge of my serged or overlocked edging. So where the edge is of my overlocking stitch here, I'm actually going to stitch straight onto that. So just a very small 1 centimetre hem, and I'm just going to ease that around as I go. You can, of course, go and iron this. Ironing is preferred, but you know, I like to save as much time as I possibly can. And that's the hem of our skirt done. Let's go and press this and iron our waistband. Now the waist section of the skirt needs to be pressed toward the band. Open that out and give that a really good press so that these raw edges are pressed up. And when this is folded down later, you'll have all of your raw edges enclosed and your skirt will sit nicely like that. So we're just going to press that. Once we've done that, we're going to also press the hem. You want to check where you've stitched your skirt band together that you don't have any pleats in your skirt that shouldn't be there. So you can see here, this is bunched up just under here. I'm going to just undo a couple of stitches there and take it back to the machine and fix that, because it's not going to look nice on the other side. You can see a big pleat there. So I'll just undo a few stitches there and even that out and check the rest of it before I put the zip in. So you can see here I've actually been in too much of a rush, and there's a big pleat there. Once you've ironed this band away from the skirt, you want to iron this band at the centre point just here. So this is the centre of your waistband. I'm not sure if you can see that line just there. Fold the fabric over and it will sit over all the raw edges that you've got here. It will also sit over the stitching line on the other side. So when we go to the machine later, we're going to be stitching in the ditch right along here. And if I pop a pin in right on the very ditch of the fabric, which is where the waistband and the skirt join, so you can see the pin is just on that seam there. You can see the pin is just on the very edge of the overlocked edges. So when we stitch this, we're going to be stitching this from the top, and it will actually secure all those raw edges underneath, and it'll secure your band as well. Press your waistband at the centre all the way along, When you're finished, you want to just make sure everything here lines up beautifully. We've got the edge of our fabric right along there, and the waistband matches up beautifully here. And if your skirt band is out just a fraction, you can just fold it under a little bit more, or pull the other side out a fraction until that lines up perfectly just here. And then press that so that all looks really nice along there. So you want to get this right. And you've got a little bit of manipulation that you can use at the top of the skirt band here. So we're going to put the zipper in now. There's lots of different ways of putting the zip in. So if you want me to do a video showing you a few different techniques, then I'm happy to do that. Just leave a note in comments. We're going to take our zipper, and we've got our fabric folded under 2 centimeters on either side here. When we put this zip in, now I've intentionally used a zip that's not the perfect colour just so that you can see what I'm doing here. I've got the metal bar at the bottom there, and I'm going to line up the folded edge of my fabric right on the centre of the top of my zip. And if you see that there, and this is why I'm using this iron designing board so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm lining up this edge of the skirt with this side of my zipper teeth, and it's just sitting right smack in the centre there. And I'll do the same with the other side, and that will sit right over the top of the zipper teeth on the other side. And you can see how that closes beautifully. And this isn't an invisible zip, this is just a regular dress zip, but you can see how beautifully you can get a zip in, and it's the wrong colour and you can't even notice it. So if you're not experienced with zips, or if you have a lot of trouble with zips, I'd recommend using a double-sided tape along here. Then everything's going to sit in place perfectly for you. But I just wanted you to see how the zip is going in, because it'll be a little bit difficult to see at the machine. Place your fabric over the top of the zipper there, just on one half of the zipper teeth. Open the waistband out, and you're going to stitch all the way up to the fold of the waistband. Then you're going to do 1 or 2 stitches extra with a back stitch, and that will secure the top section of the waistband. Sometimes your zip might not be the perfect size, or you haven't done the perfect measurement along here. Just line up the top of your zip, these metal hooks here, line that up just a smidge underneath the fold. So my fold is here. I'm going to line up the top of my teeth here, just probably about 2 teeth length underneath the fold. And then when this is folded in later, you'll have the zip sitting like that. So that'll sit really nice. So you can position the zip a little further down at the bottom here. It doesn't matter if your zip is even that much longer. It's not going to cause any problems at all. As long as you start at the top edge here, and just make sure that you've got those little metal teeth sitting on this section of the fold. Okay, I have pinned my zip in place, and hopefully you can see that I've covered one side of my zipper teeth with the fold of the fabric. And I'll remove my pins as I'm sewing. This is just to keep everything in place until I get to my machine. As I'm sewing, I'm just going to make sure that the fabric here lines up with the edge of my teeth. When I get to the top here, I'll have to move the slider out of the way to continue on up to just 1 or 2 stitches beyond that fold. Now I'm starting my sewing right at the seam just there to this side of the zip. I'm just using my narrow presser foot. Start sewing with a back stitch. Open out your zipper, and then just stitch 1 or 2 stitches beyond that fold and back stitch. Oops. And there are our teeth, nicely on the inside of that fold. Okay, I've pinned the other side in place, and it's just a matter of starting at the same spot, right at the seam intersection here, with a back stitch. And back stitch, and the zipper is completely finished. So there you can see the zipper section, and you can barely even notice the zipper in place as it is now. I could have done a little bit better. I could have undone this section here and just brought the fabric in a little bit more, but I can live with this. And we've got the zipper opening just up the top there. The fold of the fabric will come down like this, and the zip will sit just at the top there. And if you like, you can put a hook and eye in at the top of the skirt. I usually like to do that just to help protect the zipper a little bit as well. Now we can finish this skirt up by folding the waistband down, and we'll go and stitch in the ditch all the way around the entire waist. When we're closing up the waistband, we've got this fold that needs to come over like this. And we don't want the fold of our band to come right to the very edge of our zipper here, because the teeth can get caught in this section here. So as we fold this, we're just going to fold that and have it just a whisker away from the very edge of our fabric. Pop a pin in place, and that will keep just the folded edge of the zip away from the zipper teeth. Do the same on the other side. Instead of it folding straight down, just move it out to the side just a little bit. Close the zip, measure it up, and make sure that the waistband at the top is nice and flush, just along here. And if you need to manipulate that a little bit, you can do that just by folding it out or in and repinning it. So we'll go and pin the entire waistband now, and then we'll stitch it closed. Okay, waistband is pinned in place. We can take this to the machine now, and we will stitch this all the way around, starting from the zipper opening here in the ditch, go all the way around, back stitch at the beginning and back stitch at the end here as well. Once you've done that, you can give the skirt a final press and you're completely finished. I'm just starting right at the very edge of the fabric. Make sure you remember to remove your pins as you're going. When you get to the end, we'll just stitch right up to that stitching line of the zipper and back stitch, and then we're done. And our skirt is completely finished. There you go. What did you think? I enjoyed making this one. It didn't take me long at all. Drafting patterns for something this simple is very quick, and you don't really need to have much of a pattern. Putting it together is very simple. Basic side seams, a little bit of overlocking, hemming, and a waistband with a zip. Very, very simple to make. So you can have this one done in an afternoon. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you'd like to see more dressmaking videos, let me know. If you don't, I'm still going to be doing them every now and then. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I shall catch you next time. Bye for now.